Hello and welcome to the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Dietrich.
And today we're going to ensure that you have a good time. And of course,
I actually think you used that incorrectly.
I absolutely used it incorrectly.
Okay.
And just before we get any notes and someone like Ginny points out, my grammar is wrong, my word choice is wrong. I know. I did it for fun because it's what I do in the show open.
I like that you went to the opening as fast as you could so that I couldn't make fun of you. That was
Oh, I knew I was going to get it on the back end of the intro. I had full confidence because I have full confidence in your ability to master the English language and know that insure and insure are different things.
Insure.
Yeah, and then if you capitalize the E, then you've got a brand name. And
that's true.
Right.
For old people.
So, yes, but no, we're going to talk about something super exciting. I mean, this may be right up there with when we've talked about lawyers and accountants. We're going to talk about insurance today.
Yay! So exciting.
Before you nod off, I'm going to encourage you to listen because there's a lot of things you may not be thinking about that you should be.
Yes. So in the Spin Sucks community, we got the question, as an agency owner, should I have professional liability? And I said, yes. The end. She was like, thanks for your help, Jen.
and of course, the answer is yes.
Yes.
and there are some asterisks to this because you should have it. You'll probably never use it. You may need to have it to get some clients.
Yes.
If you ever try to use it, you'll probably be denied. But you should still have it.
You should have it, yes. Just like you have.
It is not very expensive.
It is not. No, it's not very expensive.
It makes life easier when you do have that big client that comes along and they require insurance to work for them. A lot of these requirements are stupid. They're nonsensical. But guess what? For like $80 a month or less in some cases, you can cover all your bases.
Yeah, I mean, you can think about professional, you can think about errors and omissions. There's a lot that you can do in that package, business liability, all of that, to make sure that you're covered. Because I prefer to have insurance just in case. I don't want to test Murphy and his law. So hey, if it costs me $80 a month, I think it's actually, I don't remember exactly. I think we pay probably $1,500 a year for everything. So
yeah, and it depends on where you are, what coverage you get, and all that kind of thing. So, but there are some important things to consider because there's the basic liability insurance, but as you say, there are other things that you can get as part of that package or additional things that you might want to get. So it's always good to work with an insurance broker who can explain to you what is out there. They help look at your business and figure out what are your exposures that you're not thinking about. So for example, once you have employees, everybody thinks, oh, well, I need, health insurance. Sure. Okay, great. We all know that.
Right.
We're not going to get into a health insurance discussion, particularly since I just did my renewal today and I'm just angry at the health insurance industry. But there are other things. I mean, some things you can think about from a benefits perspective. So a lot of agencies offer, at least a modest life insurance benefit or a disability benefit or those kinds of things. There are some novel things that are now being offered in some places, like FMLA, leave insurance. That can help replace some income when someone is out on FMLA. So there are things to look at. There are things to consider. But there are other things that you may not even be thinking about. And I was talking with an agency owner recently who does a lot of influence marketing and so has now started accumulating product samples and things that they're shipping out to these influencers. So now they have effectively a warehouse operation.
Yep.
So now you do have some things that are much more of immediate concern. What if there's a fire? What if there's a theft? You don't want to be out having to write a check to your client to cover, that loss. If you own your own building, there are certainly coverages that you're going to want to protect the structure, but also if someone gets hurt inside the structure.
Yep.
Right. So there are a lot of these little things that you may not be thinking about. And particularly as more agencies are getting creative in the services that they're offering, you may have exposure that you didn't realize. And in some of those cases, you might actually be able to file a claim. So your general liability ones and errors and omissions, those are fairly difficult to capitalize on. But there are others that are much easier and much more prudent. Imprudent not to have, I should say.
Yeah, the influencer marketing example is a really good one because I have a friend whose client is doing a bunch of influencer marketing, and they're probably going to spend about $3 million in fees, and they want to run it all through the agency. They're going to pay up front and do all those things, but at the same time, first of all, I would not want that responsibility because I'm not the bank. But there are some issues that she and I talked through a couple of days ago in terms of what that looks like from just keeping her business covered in case something happens, in case somebody doesn't get paid, or they one of the influencers comes back and sues for whatever reason. Now the agency's liable for it because they're the ones that were paying them, and the contracts between them and the agency and not them and the client. So there is a lot to think about. And I think your point about having a broker helps. I will also say that, and maybe some of you went through this last year as well, but when you get an SBA loan, you have to prove insurance. And so it's far easier to be able to call the broker and say, hey, this is what I'm being asked for. This is what I need. Can you send it over? And they take care of it. They create the certificate. They put your name on it. Like, they do everything that's required either by the client or the government, whatever it happens to be. And they get it over to you in a timely manner. So I highly, 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 highly recommend a broker. It may cost you a little bit more money because you're paying a percentage to them, but it's worth it from a time perspective.
Yeah, although in a lot of cases, and it depends, and different states can be different here, but in a lot of cases, the insurance company actually pays the broker. Yep. So you don't, you're paying for it. It's just,
right.
It's a little bit less transparent, I suppose.
Yeah.
But but it's still worthwhile because they understand, and I think what you said there is really important, the headache, right? It takes away the headache of having to deal with it. So over the course of all the businesses I've had, I've always worked with insurance brokers for both health insurance and business insurance, because then when I had a client ask for something or an employee ask for something, I just said, go talk to so-and-so.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
or I forward the email and I just get it off my plate. I
Yes.
don't have to figure out, okay, how do I create a certificate of insurance to provide to this client? How do I answer this employee's question about a benefit? I don't need to worry about it.
Yep.
I don't have to sort it out.
Yep.
There's someone who will do it for me.
Yep.
And my experience has actually been very positive with these brokers.
Absolutely.
That they just take care of it.
Yeah, and when you have a prospect who says, well, we're going to require that you have X amount in coverage and it needs to be this and this and this, it's really easy just to forward that email to your broker and say, do we have this? How do we make this work? And they just take care of it. It's fantastic. And when it's time to renew, you get an email from them that says it's time to renew. Your renewal's up in 2 months. They give you plenty of time. Here's what you need to be thinking about. Here are the questions we need answered. If you're ready to go, let's do it. They'll make some recommendations. Like, we have a health insurance plan that I got when I started my business, and Blue Cross Blue Shield no longer offers it. So they grandfathered us in, and it's a really good plan. So it renews every November. So every August, my broker sends an email and they're like, don't screw this up. Because if you're even a day late, they can take you out of the grandfather clause. So I always pay in advance. I always pay by September for the following year. But they take care of all that stuff. Like, I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have known that they no longer offer it and they've grandfathered me in. And there's all these things all these boxes I have to check in order to keep the grandfather clause. I wouldn't have known that. And so keeping me abreast of all that information has been incredibly helpful.
Yeah, no, it is really helpful to take away all that paperwork burden, because insurance companies love to send you these detailed applications for renewals and all that kind of stuff. And we got it to the point in most of my businesses where the broker would just say, okay, here's a list of the data that I need, and then they took care of filling it all out.
Yeah.
we still had to review it before we would sign the application at the end. This is not for health insurance. You generally don't need to do that, but for liability policies and things like that, you're generally going to want to look at it and make sure it was captured correctly. If you're doing work for clients that are in e-commerce and things like that, you may want to think about a cyber liability policy.
Yep.
Those can get really expensive. So that would be an exception to the, hey, it's cheap insurance. It's not. Cybersecurity, particularly if you're dealing with any kind of credit card type information or anything like that, can be much more burdensome, much more expensive. But you should at least look into it so you can make an intelligent decision about whether you want to assume the risk of not being insured versus, having it as a line of defense.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say is, especially as the idea of not going back to the office anytime soon keeps getting pushed further and further out. You have employees who are working from home and they have your technology, they have your computers, they have your phones, they have the things that belong to the business, and that stuff needs to be insured too. And that was not something that I had considered when we went virtual in 2011. It just didn't, and we had somebody's house was broken into and our stuff was stolen, and that was a pain in the neck. So
right.
I called the broker and said, so this happened. And they're like, yeah, that was stupid on your part. And I'm like, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Know that now.
Well, yeah. And so typically you're going to need to provide your insurance company with the addresses of all of these remote workers.
Yep.
It's going to need to be kept up to date in order to make sure that you have coverage. So these are some things you may have to work into your process to make sure that you're getting the benefit of the insurance that you're paying for. In most cases, they don't actually charge you more for each individual employee. In some cases, they may, again, depends on the policy, but in general, all you really have to worry about is just making sure that it's listed so that you've got that coverage there in the event that, fire, theft, employee doesn't return it, whatever.
Right. Yeah. There were 2 states, I want to say, that we had to file the insurance separately in those states, but I think that's it.
Right. But again, that's where the broker comes in handy because they know what the rules are. Yeah. They can help you navigate it. And the key thing, anytime you're working with, whether it's a lawyer, accountant, insurance broker, is just to be open with them about your business. And you have to have someone that you feel like you can trust enough to share what your business is actually doing, what your concerns are about what might happen. And frankly, you need to let them know about the warts, right?
Yeah.
You need to let them know, okay, so I've got people and they're cutting open boxes all day long and they like using this razor just straight up on its own. It doesn't even have a handle.
No.
Right. So you want to think about those things and share it so that you can make sure that you're getting the right coverage. And or they tell you, well, if you fix that and you put processes or policies in place to prevent that, then it will bring down your cost. It's like going back to cyber liability. If you have certain policies and practices in place, it will generally reduce your premiums. Sort of like, on home insurance where if you've got smoke detectors, you get a discount. If you've got a burglar alarm, you get a discount.
Yep.
It's the same thing with business insurance in many cases, where if they will tell you what you need to do in order to either get the coverage or get a better rate.
Yeah, I don't see any reason. I mean, with the few exceptions like the cyber insurance, I don't see any reason that you wouldn't have it. It's kind of like renter's insurance. Renter's insurance is so cheap.
Right.
When you're in your 20s and you have you're renting an apartment and you're like, oh, I have to buy insurance too, but it's like 3 pennies. I don't know. It's like, it's so cheap that there's no reason for you not to have it. And then the same thing here. There's no reason for you not to have it. It protects you. It gives you peace of mind. If something happens, you call your broker, they take care of it. Done.
Yep. And the other insurance that I would mention that I think agencies probably should be thinking about is employment practices insurance.
Yes.
Because it's an area where there is, I don't have any data on it, but I can say anecdotally there is more employee litigation or threats of litigation these days than when I first started my businesses 20 years ago. And so having a policy like that in place can help protect you. It's not a substitute for getting proper HR and legal advice.
Sure.
When you're doing things like, terminations or hiring or anything like that. but it certainly can be a good benefit to have in your back pocket in the event that a relationship with an employee or a prospective employee goes south.
That's a really, really, really good point. Yeah, because you never know. And some people are litigious just to be litigious.
Yep. And unfortunately, you can't tell that during the interview.
No, you cannot.
So
no, you cannot.
You want to look through these things, and I would never encourage an agency to spend a huge percentage of their budget on insurance, because it is difficult to get claims on things, and it is a difficult process to go through. But you should absolutely get as much coverage as you can reasonably afford, so that you do have the protections in place if something happens that falls within the boundaries of those policies.
Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's peace of mind. It allows you to sleep at night. It's one less thing you have to worry about.
Right. And it makes it easier when you're asked by a client, a prospect, an employee, do you have this? Yep. Check.
Yep. And that gives them confidence that you're running a quote unquote real business. So
right. Which you are, even if you don't think you are.
Right. Yes, you are.
Once you have a business, it's a real business. But anyway, I think we will leave it there, because people don't want to spend too much time on insurance. We don't want to spend too much time
I don't either. That's why I'm a broker.
Yeah. I mean, you had suggested that we could just have an episode where we just said yes, answer
Should
the question,
I have
yes,
insurance?
and then
yes,
and then we're done. But
that's it. Yes,
instead, we took about 16 minutes to give you a more detailed answer. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully you have some ideas as to the kind of coverage that you might get, or how to go about talking to a broker to get that information. So with that, I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And it depends. Thank you for listening to the Agency Leadership Podcast. You can watch or listen to every episode by visiting agencyleadershippodcast.com. The Agency Leadership Podcast is distributed on the FIR Podcast Network. Just visit www.firpodcastnetwork.com. We welcome your feedback and suggestions, and look forward to being back with you again next week.